Stand before you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Water is life. Without water, there is no life. I mean, scientifically speaking, we now even can say to a percentage of what composition of our bodies is water. But we knew long before that without water, life perishes. That you cannot exist in a place without it. In fact, it's really stark just how much we use and how many things we use it for if you ever have to go without it. Even when you go camping or something and you have to use it more sparingly, your attention is drawn to its preciousness. Last year, we had a bit of an issue with the water coming into our house. It was leaking somewhere, and we weren't sure where. And the first solution was that they turned the water to our house off at the street side with a specialized tool that we then went to Lowe's and bought one of so that we could turn it back on from time to time. But the reality was we wouldn't leave it on all the time because we had not yet been able to diagnose where the leak was. Now, this was concerning on a number of levels. Our financial worry was great. It's been resolved rather easily in the end. But the reality is for several days until we could get someone in to diagnose it, the water was off, except for when we'd go turn it on and hurry to shower and do everything we could all at once, wash all the dishes and all of these things. And we realized in those few days how much we often take water for granted. Water is life. Water is important. Now, the baptism that John offers at the River Jordan was indeed something that was transformative. The baptism that he offered, though, was reminiscent of ritual cleansings that had been offered for generations, a way of not only symbolically but actually physically preparing oneself to be in the presence of God. Ritual cleansings would take place as people entered into the temple. Ritual cleansings would take place prior to offering our prayers to God, wherever that might be. And when John offered his baptism in the River Jordan, he was knowing that he was doing something different with that same ritual. He was carrying it forward, but in a new way. And so it's not surprising that some people recognized the power and authority in what John was offering and began to wonder. I love the words that Luke uses here. Now, mind you, Luke is particularly concerned with incorporating the Gentile, the non-Israelite, who would not have had the fullness of the story of generations of waiting for a Messiah to come. And so he's trying to help share that. So he writes, they were filled with expectation. I hope that at some point in your life you have also been filled with expectation. A wonderful feeling to well up. Filled with expectation, and in their hearts they were wondering if this man John was the Messiah. I could see why they'd wonder. He's a powerful witness to the Almighty. He was offering acts of ritual cleansing that were transformative. But John sets them straight pretty quickly. John says, I baptize you with water, but one more powerful than I is coming, and he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. Now, if the water is life, the Spirit gives that life purpose. It breathes a different kind of life into you. Indeed, we see this come to be throughout the rest of the gospel, but it's in this moment that the people gathered at the River Jordan begin to understand that the water is more about getting oneself ready for worship. And the Spirit, while the gifts may be things we celebrate and honor in ourselves, often leads to serving others. The water's more about, am I clean and ready to enter into a new thing? The Spirit is what I do with it. Now, I had the good fortune to be able to travel to Israel a number of years ago, and while we were there, we got to go visit a place along the River Jordan. And often on these tours, there's at least somebody who desires to be baptized while there. It's such a significant place. And so it wasn't on our trip, but on a trip that a friend of mine was on, that he was with a group of evangelicals. It's another Episcopal priest, but they were saying that he ought to be re-baptized since they were going to such a sacred and holy place and would be at the River Jordan. And he said, no, I've been baptized. And he said, but have you been submerged? Full immersion is really the only way to be baptized, is what they were suggesting to him. Now, I can understand the appeal to a full immersion baptism, and I have even offered it on occasion. Something about falling back into the waters. It's not our natural way of entering into the water, and a bit disconcerting even to a strong swimmer, especially when you're in moving water. And when you emerge from the water in that way, it does feel like you're emerging from death in a little more real and tangible capacity than if you go in head first. So they began to work on him. They said, you really need to have that experience and be immersed in the waters of baptism. And he said, well, I've been baptized, and it's indissoluble. It can't be undone, and it doesn't ever need to be done again. He said, but maybe I'll wade into my knees with you and just be present with you. Would that be the same? And they said, no, that's not the same at all. You need to be immersed in the water of baptism. And he said, well, maybe if I waded into my waist, they said, no, you've got to get all the way into the water in order to... He said, what if I went all the way up to my chest? And they said, no. He said, what about if I went all the way up to my neck? And they said, no, you have to be immersed. He says, you're telling me that I have to have the water all the way up to the top of my head? And they said, yes. He says, I already did that. Doesn't need to be done again. We too have been baptized. We gather here in part as a reminder of our baptism. We gather to celebrate the life of the baptized on Sunday. We gather that we might be made clean and ready for ministry. And we also have received the baptism that John spoke of. The baptism not just in water, but in the Holy Spirit. Perhaps some of you have even heard God call your name and let you know that you're beloved and that the Spirit rests within you. Maybe some of you have heard this quite literally as the voice of God. Others of you who maybe think you have yet to hear that voice, I sit filled with expectation with you, but I will remind you that sometimes the voice of God comes through that indwelling spirit of the fellow baptized that sit among you in the pews. That sometimes the Spirit of God wells up within them and speaks your voice, calling you forth to ministry. And that is every bit as real as the dove that descends as Jesus is proclaimed the beloved. The water is for us. The water of baptism marks us as Christ's own. It's our commitment, our public proclamation of our faithfulness. The water is for us. In it, we find the Spirit of God dwelling within us. That Spirit of God that dwells in each of you. That Spirit of God is for others. I hope that you feel it calling you forward to service, to patience, to love, to charity, to actions that express the love of Christ as you have experienced it in your own lives. Water is life. Spirit gives that life purpose. You are each bearers of the Spirit of God and called to use it in this world.